So I'd just like to thank everyone for joining the webinar this morning. My name is Justin Pearl, and I am from Accudart. And I'm going to start off and go through the Accudart portion of the presentation and explain how it integrates with bin tracking as well as ACPAC. And if you do have any questions, feel free to just type them into the chat box, and I'll try and stop throughout the presentation to go over any of them. All right, so what I'm going to do is just quickly explain how Accudart works and integrates with ACPAC. So basically, you'll have your ACPAC server with your various users who will be using ACPAC the same way they are now. All you need is one more PC in the in the warehouse connected to the ACPAC server, and that's what you'll install Accudart on. And we have two approaches that we use. One is the 900 megahertz. The other is the Wi-Fi or 802.11. So this is using 900 megahertz. You would just need to have a base station, which is basically just a little black box connected to the COM port of the PC. And that base station covers up to about 300,000 square feet. So it does cover a very wide range. And that's how the scanners will update Accudart and update ACPAC in real time. And if you did have a second location or a remote warehouse, all you would need is one more PC connected to ACPAC through either Citrix or Terminal Services. And then that PC would, again, have another base station connected to the COM port. And that way the scanners can update Accudart and update ACPAC in real time as well. And we prefer this way just because it's simple, it's easy to use. You basically just plug in the base station and make sure the scanners are on the same frequency, and then they're ready to go. The other approach is using the Windows mobile scanners. So anything running Windows Mobile 5 or 6, so like the Motorola Intermex scanners, things like that. And how that would work is, again, you'd have your ACPAC server with your various users using ACPAC the same way they are now. All you need is one more PC connected to ACPAC, which we call the Accudart server, and that's where we'll install the web server and IIS. And then basically, as long as these scanners have internet access either through a wireless router or through a cellular provider, they'll be able to update ACPAC, Accudart, and update ACPAC in real time as well. So those are the two approaches, and with this approach, they got to make sure they have Wi-Fi. So that's basically how they connect. And Accudart will integrate, we'll install another module inside of ACPAC. And unlike some of the other WMS systems, there's not a lot that really needs to be set up. All you need to do is set up the different warehouse locations. So you can set up each warehouse. You can also track the log level at each one. You can track nothing. You can track when someone logs in or logs out. You can track up to all the menu functions, or you can track up to all the menu functions, prompts, and questions that are asked and answered. You'll set up the different users. Each user gets their own user ID number, username, password. You'll say what warehouse they work in. Right now we have a few different language options as well. And this is also where we'll set the security. So who can do what in the warehouse. For example, if you don't want someone to be able to ship a sales order, you can
Good morning, Rob Lavery.
Hi, Rob. How you doing? So if you just double-click, now that person can't ship a sales order. So this is where we'll set what in the warehouse. The last thing you set up for Accudart is the barcode table. And this is where you'll match up the barcode on the actual item, the ACPAC item number, and the unit of measure. So the same item can have multiple barcodes, can also units of measure as well. And Accudart will recognize the barcode in this table, the actual ACPAC item number, if the barcode is the same, or it'll recognize the manufacturer's item number if you use that table in IC. And that's really it as far as the setup goes. So what you're seeing here is the desktop version of Accudart. So what you see here is exactly what you'd see on the actual scanner. Same number of lines, same number of characters, everything like that. And as soon as someone turns on the scanner, it's going to ask them to log in. So the first thing it's going to ask them to do is enter the login ID number. If they enter or scan the wrong ID number, it's going to say login not found. Once they enter the right ID number, it'll say what warehouse they work in and ask them for a password. And once they enter or scan the wrong password, again, it'll say invalid password. Once they enter the right password, a list of all the different functions that they have access to will come up, and they can scroll up and down using arrows, same as on a keyboard. I have access to everything, obviously, to show. Someone in the warehouse might typically only have access to 3 or 4 different modules depending on their actual role. And I'll go through and show you some of the basic functionality of the more common modules. The first thing I'll show you is ship sales order. So hit 1 for ship sales order. The first question is ask for quantity, yes or no. If they say yes, it's like being in a grocery store. That cashier will scan an item and say they have 5. If they say no, each time they scan an item, they'll count it as 1. So I'll just hit enter for yes, and then they'll have to either scan or enter the sales order number. If they scan or enter something that doesn't exist, it'll say it doesn't exist, or if it's been fully shipped, it'll say that the order's been fully shipped as well. Once they enter the right sales order number, the customer will come up just to verify and make sure it's correct or not, yes or no. If it is, they can just hit yes. And then from there, all they would do is just scan the item number. They can enter or scan the bin that the item is coming from, enter the quantity. They can scan the next item. If the item doesn't exist, it'll say the item's not found. If the item does exist, but is not on the actual sales order, it will warn the user, so it does make sure that they ship the right items to the right customers. So they would scan the next item, bin, quantity. Then from there, it's just item quantity, item quantity. When they're done, they can hit enter on a blank item, and now they can either post, review, add, or cancel. If they go to review, it'll show them what they've shipped so far out of how many. If they realize that they forgot something, they can go back and they can add more. Or if they're done, they can hit P for post. Now what it's going to do is update everything in ACPAC, the same way if they had done it manually, update all the inventory levels, the bin quantities, like that. And depending on how ACPAC is up, it'll either create the shipment and or invoice. I have my ACPAC set to invoice at the time of shipping, so it'll create the invoice as well. And there's also an option to either print or display the packing slip. And what created the invoice. Then if you go back into ACPAC, go to order entry, go to the invoice. If we go to the last one, this is what we just shipped right now. 3 of item A1105 or A1103 and 5 of item A1105. And if you do have optional fields, it will say who shipped it, the date, and the time. In ACPAC the same as before, except now it's being done from the scanners. Instead of writing everything down on a piece of paper to hand into the office, now all being done from the back of the warehouse on the scanners. And it will also create the bin tracking document. This is what's been picked, and from which bins. But Rob Lavier will go over that in more detail during his portion. So that's shipping. Next thing I'll show you is receiving. Very similar to how ship sales orders works, but I will go through it anyways. Again, ask for quantity, yes or no. From there, you would scan or enter the PO number. Again, if you enter or scan something that doesn't exist or it's been fully received, it will say so. Once you enter the right PO number, the vendor comes up just to make sure it's correct. And from there, again, you would scan the item, enter the bin that it's going to, enter the quantity. If you do scan a lot or serialized item, it will ask you for the lot or serial number. If you scan something, again, that doesn't exist, it'll say so. If you scan something that does exist but is not on the PO, it will warn them, so it does make sure you receive the right items, so they can find out why they're receiving stuff they haven't actually ordered. Then from there, again, it's just item, scan the bin, enter the quantity. And when they're done, they hit enter, and then they can post, review, add, or cancel. If they go to review, again, it'll show them what they received and how many. If they forgot something, again, they come back and add more. Or when they're done, they would hit P for post. And now, again, it's going to update everything in ACPAC, same way as before. All of the quantities, bin quantities, in this case, serial numbers. And again, there's an option to either print or display the receipt. And then it'll give you the receipt number. So again, if you go back into ACPAC, go to the purchase orders, if you go to the receipts, if you go to the last one, here's what we just received right now. And again, if you have optional fields, it'll say who received it, the date, and the time. So if you want, you can go back and see who received what when. But the important thing to realize, all the information is in ACPAC the same as before. Again, except for now, instead of writing it down on a piece of paper, it's being done from the scanners. And again, it'll also create the bin tracking, bin transfer. If we go to the last one, this is now the PO receipt that we did. Some of the modules that we have warehouse transfers, one-step and two-step transfers, depending on what they prefer. Bin transfers, so if they want to transfer items from one bin to another, they would just scan the item, enter what bin that item is in, the bin that it's going to, and how many. And now the item has been moved from bin A1 to bin B1 once you update, and again, it gives you the bin tracking transfer number. We also have the pick and put away functions. So if you ship items out of a shipping bin, you would pick the items first. So you pick the items from the bin that they're currently in into the shipping bin, and then you would ship them out. There's also a pick by sales order. So if you want to only be able to pick items from a specific sales order, you can do that as well. The same is true for putaways. If you receive stuff into a receiving bin or a QA bin, you can do that as well. And then after that, you would do a putaway, which basically is just a bin transfer from the receiving bin to the bin that it's supposed to go to. We have different inquiries. The next thing I'll show you is physical count. So how physical count works is, let me just see, you would create the worksheet. So you would create the worksheet in Accudart the same way you would now. So I'll do one first for the first few items. And you'd uncheck that, so you start from 0. So you generate the worksheet in Accudart. And now you're ready to actually start counting. So in Accudart, you can only have one person actually entering in the counts. So we created our own tables, so they can have multiple people go around the warehouse and actually scan and count items. So once you're ready to count, you just hit 61, physical count. Again, it asks for quantity, yes or no. You'd enter the bin that you're counting. And then from there, you just scan the item, enter the quantity. You can scan the next item, quantity. And it's basically just item quantity, item quantity. Again, if it is lot tracked or serialized items, it will ask you for the lot number or serial number. So it's just item quantity, item quantity. When you're done, if you hit enter, again, you can save, review, add, or cancel. If you go to review, it'll show you what you've counted so far. If you forgot something, you can add more. Or when you're done, you just hit S for save. And now it's going to save everything into our worksheet maintenance table. So everything that gets counted will get stored into here. You can see what location, what bin, and which user counted it, as well as with the quantity. So everything that's counted will get stored into here. And once everyone is done counting, you just import that back into IC. And now if you go back into IC, you go to physical count, you can compare what's on hand, what's supposed to be on hand to what was actually counted. You can see your normal variance. Then you can do your normal adjustments and post. So it'll add up everything in that table once it's imported into IC. So instead of writing everything down for one person to add up and count to enter in later on, now it's all being done from the scanners. And you can have multiple people go around the warehouse and actually scan and count items. And it'll also update the bin inventory counts. So for bin A1, you can see what's actually been counted for that particular bin and by who as well. It'll say the user who did it. Some of the other transactions we have things like IC shipments, IC receipt, IC assemble, material usage, IC adjustments. We do have an item bin inquiry. So if you scan an item number, it'll tell you how many you have in each bin. And then we also have a bin item inquiry. So if you scan a bin number, it'll tell you what you have in that particular bin. And then we also work with things like AutoSimply as well. So I've pretty much gone through and showed you some of the main transactions and kind of listed some of the other ones as well. What I'm now going to do is have Rob Lavery go into more detail about the ORCID bin tracking. So let me just change presenters.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate that. And good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending this webinar session. Justin's just done a wonderful job outlining the capabilities of the Accudart barcode scanning system. and a good overview of the inventory movement when you're tracking items by bin by location within ACPAC. So I'll just highlight some additional functionality within the bin tracking module so you get a little bit more information about the capabilities of that specific module. As you're probably aware, you don't need bin tracking if you want to use just the Accudart solution with inventory by location, but having the ability to track items within a bin within a location gives you the extra control that many parties need to have specific information about where an item is located within a location in inventory control. And of course, it always then gives you the option to have the same item in multiple locations, let's say shelves or skids, within the same inventory control location, which is essentially why the bin tracking solution was created. So when we look at the options, there's a number of different types of transactions within the ACPAC system that are supported. The common ones include OE shipments, IC transfers, where you're transferring items between inventory locations, and usually PO receipt. And the system will work in the background so that as you create a shipment transaction or a PO receipt transaction, you can create what we call a bin transfer document as you post those transactions in ACPAC. Of course, you can also create these bin transfers manually, but in most cases it makes sense to have these transactions set up in a bin automatically. There's a couple of different pick and put away methods. Obviously the pick methods apply when you're shipping a product from a bin out to a customer. Auto pick means that the system will use predefined criteria for how you want the items picked and in which order you want them picked by bin. When we say auto pick, though, the bin transfer document is not completed. There's still a step of review to make sure that it is picking from the correct bins or that you agree with the bins that the system has selected. In some cases, if you're pretty sure about how the system should be operating and you don't want any manual overrides, you'll say auto pick and complete, and then the system will not only pick the items from the bins but complete the bin transfer so that no changes can be made. And as mentioned, you could also just say manual, which means the bin transfer document will be created, but it will be up to one of the operators to select how many quantity of items are picked from the various bins that that item is stored in. And the same is true for the put away method. On a PO receipt, for example, when we're putting those items away, we can auto put away and complete, or manually choose the bins that we're putting items away to. Now you do have some options as well. When we're putting away, we can choose that we want to put away items to the last bin that items were put away to. And usually that's the case where we either do an inspection or quarantine. So you may have a bin set up as a quarantine or inspection bin so that all items get binned automatically as they're received, but they're not put into a picking bin right away until after they've been reviewed or inspected. And then you could transfer them from the quarantine bin to a picking bin. If you don't have that check inspection step prior to binning, or you do it prior to binning rather, then you might just decide that as you receive items into your inventory, you want them to go directly into the last bin that the item was picked from. So you're constantly having an inflow of new items and an outflow of items that are being picked through the same bin. And that's a very common occurrence as well. You also have what's called a bin setup put away order, and I'll show you that in just a few minutes, which is part of your bin setup, where you can predefine the order in which you want items to be put away based on the size of the bin that you're using or particular locations that you prefer to have those items put away to. And you have the option to pop up the bin transfer document automatically or to manually have that bin transfer document popped up. So the bin setup, as I mentioned, this is where by inventory location, so you may have multiple bin locations within one inventory control location. And there's no, as you might say, algorithm for the logic that's used for the routing, because this is simply a bin tracking system. It's not a warehouse management system. So it doesn't have functionality around routing and optimization of the pick order. But what you can do is build some logic into the structure of your bin numbers so that the bin number corresponds to a particular rack or row within that rack, and maybe a shelf or a height, and in some cases even a depth if you've got multiple rows of items on the same shelf within the same row or rack in your warehouse. So if you're thinking through the layout of your warehouse or your picking locations, you can create these structures in the bin number that correspond to a specific instruction or description, and then you can make those bins active and allow all items, or you can define specific items that you wish to have within those bins. And here's where we can specify the put-away order. So one of those options was use a predefined put-away order based on how you've set it up in your bin setup. And this will allow you to control which order the system will use to put items away into bins, and you can specify whether you allow receiving and picking from a particular bin. So in the case where we had a quarantine bin, you wouldn't allow picking from that bin, you would only allow receiving into that bin, and then you would transfer to a picking bin for shipments out of the system. And when you choose the items that are allowed within a specific bin, you can use a picking sequence number within ACPAC as well. You can specify a unit of measure. If you're using serialized inventory and lot tracking, we also store lot numbers and serial numbers by item within a bin. And you can specify a restocking level for the item within a bin, and the restocking quantity for how many you want to buy and set up in the bin when you restock. It will show you a current quantity and the total quantity within inventory control, so this will give you an indication that there's only 9 items within this particular bin, but there's another 130 items that might be spread across multiple bins or at least one other bin within your warehouse. The way that the restocking quantity is used, by the way, is there is a function within the analytical reports to run a report called bin replenishment. So if you choose to use that, you can go in and choose a specific location, and I'll just use location 1 and print. And if there are any items below their restocking level, it will identify for you the bins that need to be replenished at this particular time. So at this point in time, all of the items have sufficient quantities within their bin, so there is no bins needing replenishment. And this is one way that you can manage the quantity of the stock within the bins, and it will show items that require restocking. In many cases, though, people will simply run a report to compare the bin totals by location totals, and this will tell you whether you have some items that are binned and some items that are not binned within a location, and also give you an indication as to what the total bin quantity is versus the location quantity, and therefore if there's any variances. So obviously in a case where we have more items within a bin than we have within the total location, then we need to do a physical count to verify why that variance exists. So when you're implementing a bin tracking system, we typically recommend that you do at least a cycle count for the bins and the locations that you wish to populate. And then you can verify that the quantities are in balance and reconciled for all the bins within that location. But as I mentioned, it is possible to have items binned and not binned for the same items within a location. So in some cases you may have items on a skid and you don't actually put them into a physical bin, and then you might have individual eaches that are binned. And you're able to transfer items from an unbinned state to a binned state, and vice versa. You can move items out of a bin and put them just into the location versus within a bin. So that gives you lots of flexibility in how you manage the items by bin. And then let's go into the bin transfer status. And what this does is it shows you the types of transactions that we can handle when we're doing these bin transfers. This is the bin transfer document that would be created automatically on an OE shipment or a PO receipt. And this allows you to go in and do different types of actions for different types of items. And essentially what we want to do is identify items that we want to move from one bin to another. Or in this case, what we're doing is removing an item in the location, and you can see that the item is not bin tracked. But we're going to put that item away to a specific bin, or in some cases we may just ship the item and say that because it's not bin tracked, it doesn't belong to a specific bin. And then the pick status is something that allows an individual to go in and view at a high level all the bin transfer transactions that are being created off the various types of entries put into ACPAC. And this gives an overall view of all the activity. And notice that each of these bin transfer documents are date and time stamped. And so you'll be able to go in and view by particular types of transactions or by different ACPAC users what type of activity is taking place. When we look at any of the columns in the system, you'll be able to filter by hitting the control key. So if you've got a long list of bin transfer transactions, you can add your own filter by hitting the control key. That's what we say here, press control in any column to filter. So by highlighting one of the rows within a column and then hitting control, we've added an additional filter so that if you only want to see items within a particular location, then you can filter by that location. And that makes it much easier to find the transactions that you're looking for. And then if you want to go further, you could say, well, because I've highlighted bin transfer document, I want to isolate a specific bin transfer type of document. Okay, so you've got lots of control there, and then down here on the screen it will show you that I'm filtering by first my destination location, which is 1, and then secondly by document number, bin transfer 001. And then you can refresh for any new transactions that are coming into the system, and if you wish at any point in time you can clear the filter and go back to the full screen with all transactions. So let's go through, and I believe Justin showed you quickly what this looks like in ACPAC. If we do a shipment within order entry, we choose a customer. So again, this is standard ACPAC processing that we're doing here. We pick our item. Now, of course, in the case of Accudart, this would be a transaction that would have been handled through the scanning for the pick on the shipment. So you would do your order, and let's go ahead and post that. And then when we were ready to ship, what you see popping up here are notes. This is another solution from Orchid Systems called Notes, which you can pop up and edit if you're interested in having instructions on delivery information and location information for customers. But when we ship, it's the OE shipment transaction that gives rise to the bin transfer. So when we post and create a shipment number, that will assign the order number and create the bin transfer for us. And that will be a transaction that will then appear up here in the bin transfer as a specific shipment transaction. And this has automatically selected this bin based on my criteria. And if I choose to, I can override that criteria and say, rather than picking from that bin, I wish to choose from another bin. So we're going to choose from that bin instead, and I can save that. And it's already picked the one item that I was shipping. And when I save that change, it will ask me if I wish to complete. I could say yes, and it will make the status completed, or I could have said no, and it would have left it uncompleted if I need another level of review within the system. So that's essentially how the bin tracking system works. It gives you the capability to manage your items by bin, also serial and lot controls. If you choose the replenishment through the restocking quantity, it will indicate which bins need to be replenished. But it just gives you that extra level of functionality so that you can keep better control of your items by bin within a location. There are some inquiry tools here as well. So whether you do an inquiry or run a report, you'll always be able to see a listing of the items, and recognize that within the bins we're only tracking quantities. We're not interested in tracking pricing or cost. That's what inventory control does for you. So the bin is simply tracking the quantity of the items within a bin within a location, and then tracking any variances that it spots due to quantity differences. And you can also do it by unit of measure inquiry and show complete transaction history or just totals. So if we just ran this for totals as an example, and we would be able to see all of the items with a specific unit of measure and quantity by location, item, and bin. And there are a form here if you want to change the layout of the form for the bin transfer document and include different types of information. You can do that. These are standard crystal reports. And the other thing that we do is we provide a change to the OE pick slip. So when you're running bin tracking within ACPAC and you want to show your picking slips and you run a picking slip, you'll be able to see, and I'm going to include picking slips already printed. On the pick slip, we'll add the bin information so you can see what's been picked by bin as well as by location within that bin. It looks like the system didn't get updated. Sorry about that. That should have been showing a pick by bin within that location. And what you do is you just update the standard crystal form in order to do that. I'm just going to check on my crystal form here. Okay, sorry, that one didn't actually get installed. So what I should have seen on that picking slip was a pick by bin as well as by location for that particular item. But just so you know, that comes with the software. It's an update to the standard crystal form for your pick slip. So with that, I'll turn it back to Imran. And if you have any questions, you can post those questions through the chat window in GoToWebinar. Or if you have any questions for Justin as well, we can answer those for you.
Awesome, perfect. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Justin. I hope that was able to give you guys an overview. The chat window is available if you guys have any questions. We've wrapped up a little bit earlier than expected, so I'm just going to open up the lines. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to go ahead. Okay, Rob, Justin, I don't see any questions coming through the window. I will be recording the presentation we did today and forwarding the link to all attendees. So I'm sure that they'll have an opportunity to ask you guys questions at that point. I want to thank Justin and Rob for joining us for this presentation. I just want to make you guys aware that we do carry presentations throughout the year, and I'm really counting on your feedback as to let me know what it is you guys would like to see. Please shoot me an email at isyed@bas.com, and I'd certainly, with your ideas of what you'd like to see, and try to arrange that for you guys. With that, I'm just going to stop the presentation at this point, and I thank you guys for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Imran, and thank you to everyone who attended today.
Yeah, thanks for your time.